Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2019 psychological drama movie titled Lucy in the Sky. No, it's not based off of the classic Beatles song from their 1967 Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, but there is a few references to the song, including a cover song of the classic Beatles song. No, not the one with Elton John and John Lennon performing together. That was a 1974 cover. So no, it's not going to be that particular version or the original 1967 Sgt. Pepper song, but a different performer did a cover of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It's part of the soundtrack catalog. Anyhow, the runtime for this movie is 2 hours and 4 minutes long. It is directed by Noah Hawley. The script was written by Noah Hawley, Brian C. Brown, and Elliot DiGiuseppe. The story was done by Brian C. Brown and Elliot DiGiuseppe. It is produced by Noah Hawley, Reese Witherspoon, Bruna Papandrea, and John Cameron. It is composed by Jeff Russo, the cinematography by Polly Morgan, and it was edited by Regis Kimball. And the stars of the movie are Natalie Portman, John Hamm, Zazie Beetz, Dan Stevens, Colman Domingo, Ellen Burstyn, Pearl Amanda Dickson, Jeremiah Birkett, Joe Williamson, Nick Offerman, Tig Notaro, and Jeff Donovan. So, the story goes a little something like this. So after 2 weeks of traveling through space, Lucy Cola, played by Natalie Portman, has finally returned home. But once she returns, she feels that the home she left behind is a lot smaller than she once imagined. She, of course, eventually becomes, way too grounded with being on Earth that she wanted to go on another space voyage because she just couldn't settle in with domestic home life, wanting to take some time off. No. Once her space travel was done, she wanted to go on another space mission. She was bored at home. She was bored, living a life of civilization and prosperity. She wanted to train once again, compete, take it to a unhealthy competitiveness, which of course inevitably led to her downward spiral as things just started to become more and more out of control for her. She may have probably suffered the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, which proves that illness does not necessarily come from years in military and away from home, but it could just happen to any person who just feels unsettled or uncomfortable staying in one spot. They just can't adjust. And unfortunately, that's what happened with Lucy Cola in this movie, which they say was actually inspired by true events, which I will get to in a bit. Now, director Noah Hawley is a very well accomplished director, though he's more familiar with television than he is with movies. In the 2010s, he directed two very successful shows that had solidified his position as a competent director. I mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't primed or ready yet to make the transition from TV to movies, but I think in Lucy in the Sky, he kind of had to sort of learn the hard way that the big screen and the small screen directions are two completely different animals. And I think I'm not saying that he has no chance. He does. Everybody has a chance. He's got potential to make that transition. But if he keeps making movies like Lucy in the Sky, which I have to admit was not very good, but it was an effort, maybe he would probably be better off just sticking to television. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So with the success of the TV series Fargo, he actually successfully recaptured the magic of the Coen brothers' 1996 Academy Award winning thriller. The other series he had directed was Legion, which kind of blends superhero formula with sci-fi intentions going for it, which is another great successful TV series. So to say that he lacks the experience is unjustified. He does have the experience, but he just kind of like has not adjusted to the movie market as compared to the television market. Two completely different elements. So aside from that, he's a very accomplished author too, who has written a cornucopia of novels, one of which was titled Before the Fall, which has been rumored to become adapted to the screen, and Hawley will once again be behind the lens. And for that, I wish him the best of luck. In his big film debut, Lucy in the Sky, Hawley, like I said, makes an effort. But that still doesn't make it a crowning achievement. It's a step in the right direction, but for the moment, it didn't really turn out that successfully. And I don't think it did quite well at the box office either, unfortunately. And the sad part about that is that this movie did have a lot of potential to be something really, really special. Especially coming from an ensemble of talented performers. Sure, Natalie Portman is the one who's carrying the burden on her back in the leading role. But, the supporting cast members like John Hamm, Zazie Beetz, and Ellen Burstyn also turn in some great performances as well. He brought along his usual collaborators with him, including composer Jeff Russo and cinematographer Polly Morgan. And granted, the whole Earth is smaller in comparison to the whole universe concept, as was done before in the forgettable Johnny Depp failure, The Astronaut's Wife. At least Hawley tries to avoid anything superficial and keeps everything reality-based. I mean, sure, this was actually inspired by real events. But still, I can't say there was anything that was not believable. I just wish it would have been just executed better. It's questionable that it was based on real events, although it probably was just a loose depiction inspired by true events, but the movie just kind of fictionalized it. But Lucy in the Sky is inspired by the real story of troubled former astronaut Lucy Nowak, who in 2007 was arrested for attempted murder and attempted kidnapping. And she also kind of faced the same kind of dilemma. She went on a space mission. When she came back, she was unsettled in the domestic life. She had to, of course, work hard and train to be the very best, to compete in a male-dominated environment. And when newer, younger recruits were coming in to steal her thunder, she made it her mission to completely desecrate it, which of course led to her downfall, her psychological breakdown, and inevitably her arrest. But in 2009, the charges were dropped to just burglary and minor misdemeanors. Okay, it was a shame they neglected that in real life. The real Lucy Nowak actually during her frenzy, which led to her damnation, she was actually wearing adult diapers during her trials just to avoid bathroom breaks. I know probably it wasn't really that important, but if you're going to make a descriptive true events, they should have emphasized that Lucy Nowak was wearing adult diapers. No, she wasn't wearing it because she has urinary problems or has something with her bowels. No, no, no. No, no, no. She was fine within the reaches of those areas. But the only thing she just wanted to do was just to avoid any kind of bathroom breaks. That's the reason why. I mean, she just wanted to continue her mission and did not want to stop at any restroom to take a piss or a shit. That's why she kept the adult diapers on. I know I shouldn't be talking about too much about that, but hey, if you want an inspiration to real event, they should have focused on that as well. I know it's a small detail, but it's still important. She was sentenced to 1 year probation, and she was inevitably discharged from the Navy. But she currently, as we speak, works in the private sector. I think she's also under witness protection, and she may have probably had some restraining orders. But the movie itself never focuses on that particular side of the story, but instead explores the human psyche of someone who feels that the world is just too micro compared to the humongous universe outside. And when you think about it, she's not wrong. To us, to this whole gigantic universe where unlimited is an understatement, we are just a tiny little rock. We're probably not even a rock. We're probably just a fucking little pebble. No bigger than a human fingernail. And I don't mean the thumb either, I mean the pinky. We're probably no bigger than a pea compared to a giant universe out there, full of unknown, full of knowledge, full of whatever the fuck is happening in our universe, with all these planets, with all these stars, with all these galaxies. It's endless. There's no knowing what the hell is out there. While we're stuck here in this place called Earth, there are millions of places to explore, millions of sights to see. And yet we really can't go as far as we could. We don't have the technology, and we don't have the requirements because we're either not ready yet for space travel, and you don't know what it's like out there. And to think, are we alone on this earth, in this universe? I don't think so. There are probably a lot of other creatures and stuff out there in this world that nobody knows what's out there. And we'll probably still never know once we go. So I kind of understand where she's coming from. The universe is a giant place. And we're all grounded in just one spot. So no wonder why she wants to go out there. We also sometimes feel that she's under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And a lot of it comes also from poor self-esteem issues that was brought on by her grandmother, who looked after her most of her life, who told her that failure is not an option. Being in second place is not an option. You're gonna work your ass off, and you're going to do it with a smile on your face and no fucking excuses. You're gonna work, and you're gonna be the best. And you're not gonna be in any bullshit second place. Of course, this movie too also is filled with a lot of neo-feminism in there too. Especially a lot comes from Ellen Burstyn's character. A lot of it comes from Lucy Cola's character, saying that, you know, along the lines about how men can never change, but women can evolve, and that men are messy, and it's the women who clean things up. There's a lot of that kind of issue that also comes into the effect in there. And a lot of this stuff was, you know, indoctrinated in Lucy's mind. Probably both the real Lucy Nowak and the character of Lucy Cola. Of course, a lot of the characters in this movie are inspired by the people who were prominent in the whole Lucy Nowak trials between 2007 to 2009. They changed the name, you know, I guess for fear of retribution or for respect of the people who were behind it, you know. Or, like I said, maybe this was just a work of fiction, but it was just inspired by true events. So they decided to also just alter the names a bit to make it seem like it's authentically based on the inspiration of true characters without falling victim to satire. Because I don't think there's anything satirical about this movie. It's like a thriller with some drama elements into it. As our story begins, we get a glimpse of Lucy Cola staring off into the universe, hoisted by a vacuum that bears a similar resemblance to Sandra Bullock's 2013 film Gravity. And then the whole story just really never fully takes off from there. There's a joke in there. Take off, space, rocket ship. It just seems that the film, like Lucy herself, doesn't know what to do with itself. Lucy's clueless ways sees her cheating on her mundane husband Drew, who does kind of like PR for space. Nothing really exciting in his life. She also is, like trying to get into the good graces of fellow astronaut Mark Goodwin, played by John Hamm. And we think that Lucy might be suffering from the effects of PTSD due to her being away from Earth for so long. But through Lucy and her stubborn determination, she makes one more attempt to return to space, and she becomes both a protege and an adversary to a young hopeful astronaut by the name of Erin Eccles, played by Zazie Beetz. I mean, she's training and propping up Erin to become just as good of an astronaut as Lucy. But then once Erin starts to become more involved with Mark, and maybe even falling into the realms of a possible romantic relationship, maybe a steady relationship, You know, that's when the shit hits the fan. All hell breaks loose from there as she goes from being, competitive to just full right psychologically scarred. Almost to a point where she kidnaps her niece, using her kind of like as a hostage or a bait, and they go off to wherever Mark and Aaron are going. She goes incognito, puts on a wig, a gun, and starts to attempt murder. Just so that she doesn't have her thunder stolen. But her obsession to go back to space would become her inevitable downfall. She becomes arrested. She gets put in witness protection. And then she ends up pursuing another career move as she goes from being an astronaut to a beekeeper. Starts a new life for herself. But we could clearly, easily tell that her obsession for space is still within the horizon. We don't know for sure, but that's kind of like how I kind of see things in this movie. The contributions to her downward spiral stems from her taking along her niece, Blue Iris, played by Pearl Amanda Dickson, tries to get away from her male-dominated society that's allegedly holding her down, and tries to enter the world that's not up to par with her superiority. I suppose Hawley's intentions was to keep up to date with the issues in recent times with the pushing of equality, while seeing someone's success becoming their ultimate demise in the madness. It's not that. In Lucy's world, it's not that she wants to go to space. She needs to go to space. There's a difference between wanting and needing. Wanting is something, like driven through ambition, but needing to be in something is more like driven to obsession. Wanting something is healthy. Needing something is unsettling. And that's kind of like what I get from her. Now, even though it sounds intriguing on paper, but actually watching it is quite the contrast. Okay, the other thing too that I also found kind of jarring, which is not of a technical thing, but in terms of performance, even though I would have to say Natalie Portman does a great job playing Lucy Cola, it's just that I really couldn't stand her over-the-top Southern accent. I believe it was a Texas accent, but I just found it to be. I just kind of found it to be a little bit over the top, I don't think it was really that necessary for her to sound like this. Because I don't know, I didn't find everybody else sounding like this. But anyhow, that twang that she had was a little jarring. The technical aspects of changing the formats of the screening to represent Lucy's inner thoughts of how she sees the world feels more distracting than demonstrative. Sure, the screenshots tend to go from small when she feels that the world around her is small to bigger when, she spirals into madness. It's just the constant screening format just gets really, really appalling. It becomes more annoying, almost like spoon-feeding her inner thoughts, when we could have just used it in a more subtle fashion. If they would have just stuck to one screening format, then it would have been more better off. Sometimes subtlety is an asset. Makes us want to draw our own conclusions than to have it spoon-fed towards us. When we cut to the scene where we find Lucy visiting the hospital room of her dying Nana, played by Ellen Burstyn, or the starry skies of the universe glowing, and even the cover of the classic Beatles song just seems padded on for no real purpose. Oh, the title of the song is Lucy in the Sky, so we have to have an artist to do a cover of that song. I don't know, what is it? Was it for just tongue-in-cheek humor? Does Noah Hawley actually love the original classic Beatles song? I mean, it's a good song. But it just did not really need to be padded on. That's all I'm saying. So in spite of the incoherent script by Brian C. Brown and Elliot DiGiuseppe, the acting itself was really not that bad, as I said. Natalie Portman does give it her best effort to clue in on what's being offered to us. Even though I just didn't like the accent, we do try to see what's running through her head, and she still brings as much charisma to her performance. So, I got nothing against Natalie Portman, When it comes to the supporting characters, John Hamm also shows a strong presence as a weary colleague of her who seems to understand what's going on that's making her tick. Even though he's pretty much intimidated, he's also somewhat compliant to her sexual advances. But also at the same time, he just comes to a point where there's something not right about her. But, the subtle answer is just to wave her off and wash it down with a beer. The other supporting cast are pretty much filler with very little significance. I mean, Ellen Burstyn is pretty much one-dimensional. Zazie Beetz, she gives it her all, but there really isn't. She wasn't really given really that much to do, and she would have been played off to a more prominent role. Like I said, the only two standouts were really actually Natalie Portman in the lead and John Hamm in the supporting role. That's pretty much it. Yes, I guess Hawley still needs to know the basics that directing movies is a different coat of paint than directing a television series, but I guess the learning experience will eventually pay off in the future. In the meantime, I can't fully recommend this movie because of the mundane atmosphere to what could have been something compelling. It's not a total abomination, but it's something not really worthy to gravitate about. And after that, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Lucy in the Sky a 5 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments, and I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Carrot Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.